How are you guys feeling right now after lunch? Yeah? You're sitting comfortably on your couch or on your chair? Let's change that. Please, everybody, stand up. What's coming next? Now, I want you to look around you, all the people around you. Only looking, no talking, of course, no touching. And now, as crazy as it might sound, I want you to it's a scary feeling, isn't it? Not knowing what is going to happen next or how this whole situation is going to unfold. The good news, you can relax and take your seat again. For now. But imagine you would feel that feeling 24/7. That was my reality when I finished university. Early in 2008, I was sitting at home, and I was in a way desperate. Because a year earlier, I finished university, of course, with a plan of finding a decent job, which I didn't. All I found was me being stuck in uncertainty. I didn't know if I would ever find a decent job, if I would be able to pay my bills, or how that whole situation would affect my relationship. And that feeling of not knowing was simply overwhelming. I lost my energy, my appetite, sometimes even my sleep. And no matter how fast I tried to run away from uncertainty, it was always catching up. Then one day a friend came by, and we talked about all these things and all my situation, and at one point in our conversation, he mentioned something that, and I quote, "It's a lot of fun, can be done at home, and earns you money." He called that mysterious thing online poker. In that moment, I called that a pretty good job description. Now, I didn't know anything about poker besides James Bond and Casino Royale, but you know what? I applied for the job. No CV needed, just a credit card. Got the job. And my friend was right. Poker was fun. I could play it from home. The only thing that was missing, the money part. But something about this game fascinated me so much that I kept grinding months after months after months, up to the point where I was finally able to turn playing poker into a professional living, which I ended up doing for 5 years. Now, when I look back and think about what fascinated me about this game, I think it was, besides the fun and besides the potential money, it was that in its core, poker is all about dealing with uncertainty, but in a playful way. I mean, think about it. You never know what cards will come next. You don't know what the other players will do. You don't know if you win, if there will be even a paycheck by the end of the month. And dealing with that day in, day out, turned poker into my personal uncertainty boot camp. And it taught me, in a way, strategies to deal with that feeling of not knowing in a more confident way, in a more resilient way, while at the same time having more fun. Not only at the poker table, but also in life. And for that reason, today I'd like to share 3 of those strategies with you that you can apply, beginning today, to shape your tomorrow the way you desire. So what do you say? Are you ready to join that game? Then just give me an all-in. I think we can do better. Just give me an all-in. Wonderful. Then join that game. And we start with the first strategy. Now, the first strategy, I like to call it focus on the process. Here's what it means. One of the biggest challenges that I was facing very early on was, how should I deal with short-term results? Just picture a typical work week later on in my career. It's a Monday morning, I go to work, take my seat at the virtual poker table. I work for a couple of hours, and I win a few $1,000. Lunchtime. After lunch, I go back to work, I lose a couple of $1,000. Mondays, what can you do? Tuesday, big winning day, pretty cool. Wednesday, big losing day, not so cool. But what I have just described, this kind of like variance, this kind of financial swings, they were quite common in poker. Because no matter how hard I tried, there was one thing that I could not control. Luck. But my brain didn't care. My brain loved staring at my winnings and even more so at my losses. And that is because of something that Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman called the outcome bias. The human tendency to judge a decision based on its outcome. It's not only misleading, it's also painful. And between the two of us, it made me do stupid things. Sometimes I was chasing losses when I should have quit. And sometimes, I gotta admit, I was even throwing coffee cups against the wall. The really stupid part, I didn't even finish the coffee first. But if you look around you in life, you will see that outcome bias everywhere, don't you? Think about sports. A team wins, trainer is a genius. Same team loses the other day, he might need a new job. Or you have an idea. If it works out, a lot of people knew it. If it doesn't, you hear those three magical words, I told you, right? But there's a better way. There's a better way of dealing with that. And this is to focus on the process, on how I was playing. And the moment I started doing that, I learned a lot. Because I learned that focusing on how I played, that was something within my control. And with that control came back the confidence in dealing with all that uncertainty. And on top of that, while focusing, I began focusing on the process, on how I played, how I made the decisions. I suddenly saw so many opportunities to improve my game, to learn something, which was never possible by just staring at my losses. Now that strategy was great for my game. It was also great for my nerves. And it certainly was great for my coffee cups. But as a side effect, it was also great for my win rate. In poker, but even more so in life. Take this TEDx talk here today as an example. I can't control if you like it. I wish I could, but I can't. But I was able to control the process of preparing for it. For example, by rehearsing, which of course I did 135 times. Ask my wife, Carolyn. Or when you give a presentation like this, like we have seen many today, you can't control if the clicker works or if it doesn't. But you pretty well can control the process of dealing with the situation if it doesn't, in a pretty elegant way like we have seen today from our first couple of speakers. I mean, they could have easily crashed that thing down, smack it, and stomp on it. They didn't, and that was their choice. And do we have any parents in the room? Let's face it, we can't control how our kids will turn out. But we can control the process of raising them to the best of our ability. And all that is only possible if we shift away from focusing on short-term results and focus on the process. Now that was the first strategy. But I noticed at one point, although it was a game changer, I didn't do it all the time. Luckily, that is where I learned strategy number 2. And I like to call it value the small pots. Here's what it means. Now, poker is quite an interesting game and quite an exciting game, especially if the pots get a little bit bigger. But here's the bad news. Big pots don't come along that often unless you are James Bond. And I remember many, many sessions where I was sitting at home in a session, working, and waiting for the big things to happen. What I didn't realize at that time, while I was doing so, I was missing all the small pots. Big mistake. Because it turned out that those small, seemingly unimportant pots, they quickly add up. And long-term can make all the difference between me becoming a winning player and me going broke. Those small, seemingly unimportant pots, each of them was a big opportunity to have fun with what I was doing for a living, in my case, playing poker. And each of those small, seemingly unimportant pots was a big opportunity to learn something and improve my game and my strategy. Small pot after small pot after small pot. Now, that strategy, as you can imagine, was great for my game in poker. But it was also great for my game in life. Take my relationship as an example. Carolyn and I, we are now together almost 25 years. And along that process, you can imagine, we played our fair share of big parts. I remember the first time she introduced me to her parents. Whew, that was a really big one that I luckily won. Or when we decided to move together as a couple, same apartment, 24/7, that was another big one. Or when we decided we are crazy enough to become parents, which, by the way, is a very lovely process, that was a massive part. And all of them matter, don't get me wrong. But looking back, I can say this. What truly shaped our tomorrow more than anything else were those small conversations, were those small moments of encouragement, and were those, I gotta admit, small 135 rehearsals Carolyn had to endure. That's what shaped our tomorrow, our relationship. Let's pause here for a second and ask yourself this. Think about all these small parts that you are playing, maybe without noticing it on a daily basis, and ask yourself, what would change if I would start valuing them just a little bit more? What could I win? Maybe it's a little bit trust from someone because you listen more carefully. Or maybe you win a little bit more happiness because you put away your phone a little bit more often. I don't know what it is, and it's up to you to find out, but I know one thing. It is those small, seemingly unimportant parts that shape your tomorrow more than anything else, so I suggest you better value them. And that brings me to my final strategy. Now, the first two were more focusing on the inward. Now it's time to focus on the outwards, on the people around us, the players around us. I call that seek to understand others. Here's what it means. There's this saying in poker that I still believe is pretty cool. I heard it very early on, many, many times ever since. It is this: poker is not a card game. Poker is a game about people, played with cards. It's pretty cool, isn't it? What's not so cool is the fact that I paid a lot of money before I truly understood the meaning of this saying. Because for way too long of a time, I was making it way too much about me, myself, and my cards. Question: have you ever been in a conversation with a person like that in real life? Be careful at whom you're looking at right now. Let's face it, it's no fun, isn't it? We don't want to play with a person like that in life. In poker, I can tell you, people want to play against you because they know this player is not paying attention and is not adjusting his strategy, which is the last thing you want to hear other people speaking about you being a poker player. Right? Remember what I said early on? Poker is about dealing with uncertainty, and at this point you already know life is the same. So every player, every person, for example, in this room that we are encountering, is a source of uncertainty. So we better do our best seeking to understand them as much as we can. How do we do it? We start with listening. Listening to the stories that people tell us with chips at the poker table, with words in life and business. We observe the actions those people take. And of course, we try our best to walk in their shoes as much as we can, trying to get a feel for how they take and what is driving them. Now, that strategy in poker was a big win for me. In life, this strategy turned out to be a big win for everybody at the table. For example, the moment I began listening more to my wife, the more I realized, strangely, there are people on this planet who don't like to talk about game theory. Or the more I walked in my customers' shoes, the more I began to understand how to develop better workshops. And the more I began leaning back and observing my kids instead of telling them what to do and how to do it most of the time, I learned that they have a very inspiring perception of reality. And all that was only possible the moment I began to seeking to understand others more often. Now everything comes to an end. In my case, I finished my career as a professional poker player in 2015 because I felt it was time for a new adventure. But you know what? In a way, I never quit playing the game. It just got a different name: life. And I took those 3 strategies with me, and they serve as a daily reminder to focus on the process, to value the small parts, and of course to try my best to understand other people's. And they served me well ever since. For example, I explored opportunities like building my own training business, using poker to train decision-making in business. Or I used it to explore and enjoy the uncertainty that comes with speaking in public, which my wife is pretty happy about. And of course, I use those 3 strategies as a daily reminder to be at least as cool as James Bond when it comes to being a dad. And I bet at least one person in this room believes in himself. Which brings me to my final question for you guys. What is your next play in life? Is it maybe changing something in your career? Or is it maybe adjusting something in a relationship? Or is it maybe doing something you always wanted to do, but you never did because that feeling of not knowing was simply overwhelming? Whatever it is, remember this: life is not about running away from uncertainty. Life is about going all in with uncertainty. And from now on, with those 3 strategies that I shared with you here today, you will always have an ace up your sleeve in the most important games that you will ever play: life.